Welcome to Money Conversations with KJ. KJ is a lifelong entrepreneur who's made a lot of money, lost a lot of money, and found his way back again. If you're looking for a sterile how-to, you're in the wrong place. KJ and his guests will walk you through real-life situations told by the people who live them, and they are as messy as they are inspiring. Each episode will offer lessons learned, advice on how to replicate successes and avoid pitfalls, and a new perspective to power your financial literacy. Far from a one-size-fits-all, this podcast can help you build a roadmap to your personal promised land. Milk and honey for some, whiskey and steak for others, and remind you that you're not alone on this journey.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Money Conversations with KJ. I'm so excited today to have this gentleman on the show today because I've known him now. Believe it or not, I can't believe I've known you about 6 years. Time flies. And he's in the same space, actually, and we're going to get into that later, but we want to find out his journey, right? So today we have Mr. Eric Mueller. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, KJ, thanks for having me, buddy. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I think, I know what you do. We've had a lot of conversations, but we're going to start way back, and I don't know any of the story way back, right? So almost all the podcasts and the listeners understand I like to go back as far as your memory will allow you. The first question that I want to find out from you is, how old were you when you can remember, when you understood what money was for, why there was money, right? When mom and dad either gave you what I like to call bubblegum money, right?
Sure.
When did you understand that we traded money for stuff? How old do you think you were?
Well, probably about 12 or so. I remember a couple things. One, I did the proverbial little lemonade stand where I decided I wanted to kind of make my own money. It sounded really cool. I organized my little dollars that I get for allowance in my wallet and put them all straight. And I heard some guy say, respect your money, it'll respect you. So I remember that story. And then I remember playing on the street one day, and this guy in this old Datsun B210 cruises by, and it's probably late 70s. And his name was Rick Cherry. And he said, who wants to make some money and get a paper route? Most guys like, oh no, but I'm like, I do. And I talked to this dude and he broke it down for me. So I got a paper route, man. And I still remember folding those things and going out and on my bike, rain or shine, it was making my money doing a paper route. So that's probably my first recollection.
Your first recollection, and that's at 12. Now, a lot of the people out there, you guys that follow me, know that and I can't remember that far back. But a lot of folks tell me it's like 5-6 years old, right? But at 12, I mean, you learned real fast, and then you sounded like you learned not just fast, but like a little entrepreneur spirit in you, right? You wanted to go make money. Why do you think at 12 years old you figured it out that fast and that you wanted to make money? What did you want? What did you want to do with that money?
Well, ultimately, I liked the idea. I didn't understand the intellectual concept, obviously, at age, but the idea of me being in control of input-output at that age, knowing I could kind of decide, I just felt intuitively that was something that I later wound up realizing was something that I was more called for, so to speak.
Well, which is interesting because, as the older we get and we reflect back, why we do the things we do with money. And I was just listening to this other podcast about, what we have are the behaviors with money. And so that was your first start of you creating a behavior with money, right? A relationship with money, and understanding very early that money's going to get you things, right? Like you said, the in and out.
Right.
If I can make this, I can get that. What were you spending your money on at 12 years old? Or were you spending or were you saving?
Well, I was doing a little of both. I was starting to save it away, but I also like, being able to go out and, buy my own little burgers and stuff here and there and hang out with my friends and kind of have a little extra spending money outside of a conservative allowance. So it really gave me a planted seed of, again, realizing, I'd like to be able to have the disposable income. Obviously, reference it that context then, but at an early age.
So, I mean, you just mentioned there, outside of the small allowance you were getting, but the fact is that you actually got an allowance as a child. Do you remember how old you were when mom and dad started an allowance with you?
Yeah, probably around fifth grade or so. I remember when I moved with my mom, my parents had split, and then she said, well, we're going to do an allowance and this, that, and the other, and dad's going to help out, and you got to earn it for chores. And it was pretty menial, but it was at least, again, I remember going and as a little kid getting a little savings account and then getting a checking account as a teenager, which is a tradition I had repeated with my sons, and banking and treats in respect for money and the whole money system within banking. And so that's been a cool tradition.
Okay, I was just going to ask you, I mean, do you do it with your kids? I never gave my kids allowance. I personally didn't believe in it. I figured, listen, it's my job to take care of you. You want the extra things, great. They would have to get good grades to get better things. You know, I would reward them with that. But I felt like I felt like, and again, I didn't think about money then as I do today, that teaching them the value of money and, you know, what it really takes. I don't think kids up until, oh, heck, who even knows how old, 18, 20 or further out, what parents do to make money, right? How hard parents out there, most parents really work hard for their money, right? To just be handing over, you know, things that their kids want. We always want to have our kids live nice and whatnot. But, well, that's interesting because I don't really hear. Do you hear about people giving allowance these days? I don't really hear about that anymore.
I hear it every once in a while. It's funny you should. I don't give my kids an allowance because I also don't necessarily believe in it myself. I think like anything else, you learn the things from your parents that are, you know, things you'd like to hold on to and remember. And I remember my father was a great part-time dad because, again, they split, and he ultimately kind of became a quasi entrepreneur in the sense that he was self-employed and a consultant. But as far as the true depth of really being an entrepreneur and understanding the dynamics of how to set up companies and how to really handle your money, he was not good at that. And so I think taking some of the positives I had from him, but also then expanding on the things that I did not learn from him, allowed me to have a better grasp of kind of how I raised my sons, which, like you, did not include an allowance.
Well, you know, the other things that I'd like to ask the guest on here is, like, share with us your memory. What was your earliest memory that you remember where mom or dad or them together sat you down and talked about money and started explaining what money is, what it's for, how they make it, and how you're going to make it later in life, and all those things? The money talk. Did you actually get one of those from mom and dad?
There was not a formal money talk. I know mom was took pride in that. Her grandmother taught her how to balance a checkbook. And so she said balancing a checkbook is an important thing. And so as a teacher, she kind of, again, went over that basic thing with me and wanted to help me get my own checking account at the bank. And I remember her taking me, which was pretty much the extent of any fiscal mentorship, if you will, from either of my parents. My dad was great at earning it because he was talented, very intelligent, very well-skilled at what he did consultatively, not as good at keeping it and maximizing the growth of it.
So, I mean, okay, so mom taught you checking account, let's go to the bank. You learned about, hey, here's the bank, and I'm sure she told you things about the bank and keeping a balanced checkbook. What specific things did dad teach you about money that like you remember and maybe you still do or don't do today?
Well, I think the idea of, he taught me as far as the difference where he worked in a corporate model most of his life until he was probably in his 50s, and then left that into a consultative role and made his own hours. And I remember that shift in basically him sharing that ultimately, you know, if you could ever be your own boss, you know, that's the way to go. Looking back on it, again, he only hit the tip of the iceberg because he was a consultant and didn't do all the other things with leveraging systems and different things in this generation that, you know, could have taken him to a whole nother level. But I remember that distinction and having that in the back of my mind.
Well, you just brought up a good point, you know, because here we are in 2022, and the things that are available, not just to you and me, but the young adults, right? As far back as we want to go, 12-year-olds even, right? Because there's so many young kids on YouTube today making a lot of money, but we'll set that aside for a minute. That back when, I mean, I basically grew up in the 70s. You were probably in the 80s when those were your growing up years, right?
Yeah,
and we didn't have the technology, right, that we have today. And so it was pretty basic back then. But would you say that which one of your parents would you say that you modeled after, right? You emulated, like, I want to do what dad's doing or mom's doing, or were you like, no, I don't think we think consciously back at 15 or 18, hey, my parents aren't teaching me anything, I better go learn, right? I think that comes with time. But what do you think it was for you?
Well, I think, again, mom was a stay-at-home mom up until I was in middle school when my parents split and went back to work. And she was an employee in retail, high-end retail. And so she was just working her buns off to, make her own income. So there wasn't a lot of money principles there. And again, I got some from dad as far as the idea of being your own boss. But really, the education about money came from reading books.
Okay.
And ultimately, as you know, no internet back then.
No, we had to grab actual books. What about, did you pick up anything? Robert Kiyosaki is really famous for his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? Which means he had his dad and then he had his friend's dad, aka neighbor dad, right? And that was his whole premise of his book. Did you have anybody similar to that up until between the age of 12 when you started making money until whatever age? Did you come across anybody, let's say before the age of 20, that kind of mentored you and you learned a few more things?
No, my mentorship opportunities came later as an adult. It was really going to the bookstore and starting to read some of those things like Kiyosaki, like one of my favorites that I still have a hard copy, which is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Those types of books. And then from a mindset standpoint, Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins, some of those old school guys.
Right. I don't know why I'm getting a beeping.
That's mine. I thought I turned my phone off.
Okay. Well, again, I'm trying to. There's so many people out there, and the commonality that I find with all these stories, when we're young, right? That one, parents aren't teaching us, right? They haven't taught us. They still haven't. I think that's why this chain can't break, right? Until we're proactive and we sit down with our kids at the early age. And I like to share with people, I think you need to start talking to your 7-year-old, your 8-year-old, because I think by 12, we've developed our personalities for sure. By 12, we've developed habits of how we are going to do things. And again, if you ask me to go that far back, I can't, right? I just can't remember that. But a lot of folks do, and they remember where you had lemonade stand at 12. But even kids want stuff at 5, 6, 7, right? I mean, I got grandkids, yeah. They want XYZ, and nowadays they want iPads, right? Well, that's $700, right? That's not bubblegum money, right? That's a few bucks. And they just think well, no, just get me one, right? You're an adult, you can afford it. And the reality is, so many households, that's a big purchase today for a lot of households that are out there struggling with money to help their kids, do what they want. So what about what was your first job? Do you remember your first job where you got an actual paycheck?
Well, technically with a paper route, but more of a formalized job, because I don't even remember at that age if they just gave an envelope with cash or whatnot. But I remember my first actual job was, I think I was a sophomore in high school, and I worked at a local burger joint that was real popular, and I did deliveries on my skateboard through Beverly Hills.
Wow.
It was a blast, man. And I remember I made minimum wage, which back then was like $3.35 an hour.
Exactly.
Plus tips.
Plus tip. But that was an actual job. Okay, so then you were excited. I mean, the one thing I remember for sure, I remember my first paycheck because I remember what I did with it, right? I live in Vegas, and my first job was I was a busboy at a restaurant. And my first paycheck, 2 weeks worth of work, was $220. And I went right out and I bought me a $220 Seiko watch.
Oh, wow. There you go.
I was into the watches back then, right? I still like watches today, but that was a lot of money back in 1978, right? But that's what I did. I know there were some friends of mine at school had a little more money and they were having the Seiko watch was the watch back then. And And that's what I remember. Do you remember what you did with your first paycheck? Did you go out and like, woohoo, let's go have some fun and spend some money?
I don't know if it was my first one technically, but I do remember was as soon as I had some money, I wanted to get myself a better skateboard. And I remember getting a Sims skateboard and the cool wheels. I forget what they were, but it was like I was stoked because I went and got my own little skateboard, and I forget what it cost, maybe just $100 or so, but it was like you said, a lot of money back then.
It was a lot of money. Well, when kids earn money and they're still living at home, obviously kids have no responsibilities, got no bills. And so every penny they make, they can just go do whatever they want. But I remember the lesson I taught my youngest when she went to get a job, but she didn't get her first job till 18. And I says, as long as you live with me under my roof and I pay for all the bills and your car and everything, I go, you will save 50% of that check. And she did. And now she's got great saving habits and, her whole story, which is great. I think when parents don't do things like that to their kids early, we're setting a tone that can follow you for years and years and years. You agree?
I totally agree.
Right. I think if parents could be, but again, I talk about parents can't teach what parents don't know. Right. This is why money conversations exist. I have these types of conversations with people. I had a guy call me yesterday, a friend of mine. He goes, KJ, I was talking to my neighbor. Next thing you know, we're talking about money. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you need to go listen to KJ's podcast. This guy is from Mexico. His kids don't even really speak great English, but they were having that conversation. So I said, yeah, no, I'll talk to that guy. Don't worry about it. And because he was asking me, hey, would you mind spending a few minutes with that guy? And I said, yeah, because think about how long it will take to break this chain of generationally having bad financial behavior, which becomes bad financial decisions, and how you get stuck in the rut of paycheck to paycheck, never really reaching milestones with money. I mean, it starts earlier than people realize. You can't think that you're going to teach your 21-year-old about money. They're already set. Right. They already have their beliefs and their behaviors. Right. So the fact that we can talk about them, and I do these podcasts and help people, I'm getting good response and people are listening, which is good. That's why stories like yours, right? You're remembering back what you did. So what do you remember with money as far as credit cards? Do you remember when that got introduced to you, and how old were you?
Well, I remember, again, I didn't really get taught what I call the fundamental principles of banking like most people. So I remember initially probably getting my first one when I was in college. And then I remember kind of going out and playing with it a little bit like a lot of people. And then I realized that affected my credit. And then reading some books and whatnot, I started creating the disciplines and behavioral patterns on how to build better credit. And I remember my first house that I bought when I got married to my first wife was when I was 25, and I had built out my good credit and understood the basics on how to do that. And so I remember that was a big deal for me.
Well, let's back up there, because you jumped all the way to married, 25, credit cards. Like, whoa. You didn't wake up one day and go, all right, here's credit cards and here's how that works. Somewhere you got introduced. I mean, I think we all have known about credit cards. They've been around. They really didn't start getting hot till around probably your age back then, right? Mm-hmm. Because credit cards before 1980 were, people thought, oh, that was just for the rich, like the elite get credit cards. Like, it wasn't like in today's world, anybody can go get a credit card, right? But back then it was definitely tougher to get them. And as you say, I mean, who told you about them? Where would you go find out the information of, well, where do I even get one? You said college, which brings me back to, I've seen the stories of, and I call it's predatory, actually, if you think about it, how those credit card companies would just go out there and have their,
go to the college.
You're right. And they're like, they're there at a table and like, yeah, come on over. Yeah, sign here. And here's a credit card. I mean, they were promoting debt like crazy, right? And kids had no clue. Like, debt is like, they were feeding you crack, basically. And you were like, yeah, give me some. So before college, before you got to college and got that credit card, you hadn't thought about them at all? You didn't?
Not really. No, I wasn't introduced to it. It wasn't something I was taught about.
So I think that's a good lesson. I think I might work on that one. there's probably a lot. You think in today's world, there's still a lot of kids that really just don't even. It's not even in their blinders where, I need to get a credit card, and then they get introduced during college, or they don't even know till they get to college and there's the table and sign here.
Right.
Do you think? I'm surprised that they even allow that still, but it's still going on, isn't it?
Well, I'm sure it is. Well, and that's why, again, fortunately, based on ultimately, learning a lot of these things and having the privilege of ultimately mentoring other young guys, and then having children myself, being able to, with both of my sons from the time they were young, teach them kind of the fundamentals within the different playing fields, right? Banking, real estate, some of the fundamentals that a lot of people never learn. Fortunately, I've taught them. And so both of my boys are, very much ahead of the game.
Right. Well, because where you are today, yes, you're definitely going to be much more proactive than the average parent. I could say that for sure. The average parent's not sitting with them and discussing that, basically because they're not handling their money correctly. They don't know what they're doing, right? And back to the parents can't teach what parents don't know. And again, that's not good or bad. Unfortunately, that's just what it is today, until people decide to become proactive about learning the money game. And it seems to be more, though, because I've noticed, and you've probably noticed, there's so many apps out there, right? And investing seems to now be a fad, right? Because kids are making so much money. Like, I think Bitcoin got people of young ages to be like, oh, that's investing. Oh, let me go get some money. I'm going to put some money in there. And I think that's fantastic to a certain point, because I think what the early or younger people don't quite recognize, investing, there is risk. 100% on any investment you make, there is risk. And if anybody ever tells you, I do this investment, I guarantee it. They use that word guarantee. I mean, you need to turn around and run immediately, because they're scamming you. They're getting ready to take you.
Yes, when you use the word investment by nature, by definition, is risk, period.
Risk, right? And as you know, because you're in the space, it's illegal for somebody licensed who does anything financially. You cannot use the word guarantee. It's illegal. You're just not even allowed to use that word, because there are no guarantees.
Exactly.
So that's why I share, and I hope the listeners that are out there, because there's some darn good salespeople out there that can, talk you right out of your pants almost, that when they use that word guarantee, you can be guaranteed they're swindling you. I could tell you that.
Right.
If they're doing that.
For sure.
Yeah. So when you learned about credit cards, you didn't know about credit yet. You just thought, hey, they told me to sign here. They're going to give me this little piece of plastic. It's worth $2,000 or whatever, and I get to spend it, and then I have to pay it back, right? When do you think you actually learned how credit cards work, the advantages and disadvantages of them?
Well, probably in my early 20s, when I realized, how it was tantamount and critical for doing things like qualifying for a loan on a house. And so I honestly don't remember specifically who I got the guidance from, but probably a book or some talking about how to pay down some of the debt and whatnot and get the score back up over 700. And I did that to qualify for the loan, and I had a new relationship with it from that time moving forward, fortunately.
Well, even purchasing a home, you said at 25, right?
Mm-hmm.
So purchasing a home at 25 is young. And I think especially today, I think a lot of the younger generation don't want that responsibility at that age. They just still want to be out there having fun. When did you know that you wanted to buy a house and you started to put in action some goals to be able to achieve to buy a property? How'd that come about?
Well, I was in my early 20s. I kind of, by circumstance, found myself on a very accelerated professional track, because I was, in my 21, and I was still kind of going to school and working part-time in a fun industry where I was doing private security services for music venues and sports athletic events, and meeting cool people and having fun. And I interviewed by chance for this other position in a security profession, but it was like a management position in charge of a whole big account. And somehow I interviewed really well and found myself at 21 with a middle management position. I think they thought I was 26, but oh well, it worked out okay.
Right.
And so just being that fast track, right, is, as I think we've talked before, the entrepreneurial track is in your face, man, all the time now. Podcasts and online and apps and, everywhere. Whereas when we were looking at it, it's go to the bookstore and read. And so my initial track was corporate America. My goal was to be a CEO of a company, man, not just by 50, but what if it's a smaller company? I could do it by 40. So that was like the whole dream. And I found myself just like proverbially at 100 miles an hour, kind of going into promotions. And so by the time I was 25, I was already into a nice position and had dated my high school sweetheart for a number of years. So I was already forced to a level of responsibility, focus, maturity that was pretty much, a decade or so ahead of my peers.
Oh, for sure.
And ironically, I realized that wow, this is not everything it was cracked up to be. I don't even want to be on this track anymore by the time I was 28.
So, you were mentioning, I'm thinking, based on earlier when you talked about what your dad did, and some people ask me, why are some people have the entrepreneurial spirit and some don't? And I'm thinking DNA. I really do. I just think,
it is for sure.
I think it's DNA because most people that I know that are entrepreneurs at whatever level, their parents were one or both parents were entrepreneurs, right? Mm-hmm. It's either DNA or for sure I know that we subconsciously learn things from parents without actually having a lesson, right? So if you saw mom and dad, or dad actually in your case, even from the age 5 years old, you're just recognizing that, hey, my friend's dad next door wears the same uniform every day, and then he comes and leaves every day at the same time. And that's a job, right? Mm-hmm. Versus your dad didn't wear the same clothes every day. His hours were different. And you don't know at 5 years old that means entrepreneur. You just don't even know that. You just recognize the patterns of what dad's doing. Do you think that had something to do with you having such a young entrepreneurial spirit?
Well, certainly I saw it. One of the things that I was attracted to seeing ultimately when my dad became a consultant later on when I was probably a teenager, but was just that time where he kind of made his own schedule. There was a level of freedom and autonomy that came with his position that inherently I was attracted to. And as you've talked about it on your podcast and just in general, there's a lifestyle where, he's going to the beach and doing different things because he can have the time that I really liked. And say, man, if I could work hard, but make my own hours, that would be great.
And the reason I bring all this up, because I know there's people out there that they're listening, they have kids, right? And I really am trying to get the message across, guys, if you don't talk to your kids, they're watching you. And they're learning either consciously and or most of the time subconsciously. They're learning. And they're little people and they're growing into big people and they're developing these behaviors and then habits. And it's, I guess it's sad for me when you see a 22, 25, 28-year-old who has no clue still about what they're doing, how to do it, money, anything. They're still clueless, right?
A lot of them out there.
There is a lot of them out there, right? And they don't even, I through conversation, and I asked the question, right? Hey, how old were you? And this isn't for you because we know that you learned early that how old were you when you recognized you weren't doing the right things with money and that you had to kind of figure this game out? And most people tell me right around age 30, give or take a year, is when people reflect. I think you turn 30, and I think we all reflect anyway. When you turn 30, you look back at the 20s. What did I do? And first of all, we all know how fast that time goes, right? Like, holy crap, I already went through my whole 20s. I'm 30, right? Yeah. And then they reflect like, I don't have anything. I don't have any money. Man, I really got to start to be an adult now, right? Not recognizing, you and I know that time, right? Putting money away early, compounding, those 10 years cost you later in life. Those years of not putting money to work cost you hundreds of thousands or more money. Would you agree?
For sure. 100% true.
Right.
100%.
That's why I like to talk about money, have people hear other people's stories, and yours is great, that you learned early. Now, that being said, you bought your house, you're working. What would you consider your first big successful where you're like, I made a nice chunk of money and I need to know what to do? Because there's making money and you can save and stack it. And then there's, as an entrepreneur, we'll have these windfalls, right? A nice big chunk, right? I've had big chunks, 6-figure big chunks money come in. I mean, at what age did that happen for you? And what is your mindset? What was it? We're like, what do I do now?
So probably as far as that first big win, so to speak, or the home run, if you will, financially, was when I realized that the corporate track in that particular, relationally, professionally, I was realized not the right marriage, not the right career. And so I literally did a big shift and wound up that marriage didn't work out. And I resigned from my corporate position as well as my MBA program. So it was a big, big shift. But then as fate would have it, when you least expect it, and probably the worst technical possible time, you get opportunities that, punch you in the face, which I did when I met Leslie Gamboa, who's now Leslie Mueller. It'll be 25 years in June. And so that propelled me in a whole different trajectory. And so I got involved in the insurance business and in a niche where we did benefits consulting for the independent contractor, small business owner that didn't have great big bennies. And I wound up moving up through that industry and ultimately running my own agency. So to answer your question, I was about 35 and I had been with that company over 6 years, almost 7. And I was running a big agency and they were actually a publicly traded insurance company. And they were owned by a huge equity group called the Blackstone Group. And so they actually wound up selling the company because, as you remember, in the 2000s, things were going up. And so they cashed out, and I had a really neat and unique caveat to my contract as an independent contractor, which was stock options, which is very rare. And so when they sold, I basically had a high 6-figure payout on my stock over a 4-year distribution schedule to honor non-circumvention, non-compete agreements, but also a nice low 6-figure residual income stream on the book of business. So I was like, wow, I was technically kind of semi-retired at 35. And I went and remember, looking for a beautiful home that we had built by a golf course. And that was like a big, big deal, getting a dream home at that age. But also the entrepreneur and financial part of me said, hey, I don't want to take this and just go buy stuff that's depreciating in toys that aren't of value. So that was my really foray into getting into real estate investments more aggressively. As I said, hey, I could take some of these nice chunks on these stock distributions and turn that into acquiring real estate assets that will continually pay me cash flow versus a stock payout. So one-time payment, and then what are we going to do to make that money work for me? And so that's how I got into real estate investments, was in that transition.
So, okay, that all happened right around 35, and those great things happened for you. Before those things happened for you, how old or when do you think you started to think about retirement? When did retirement come into your mindset? Like, I got to start thinking about this retirement, this later thing. When do you think you started thinking about that?
Well, it was this, in my corporate days, it was this thing that you did this 30, 40-year stretch and you might get a watch and you've got this 401k and like everything comes together and, like till you're 65. And then as I worked as hard as I did in that space, I realized, man, I don't want to have to grind that hard till I'm 65 to then get there after all that time. And so understanding the ability on input output to have a more of a control on my earning capacity, being an entrepreneur initially in the insurance space, it was something where I kept moving it up. I was like, I want to be 55. And then as I realized, well, maybe I could do it by the time I was 45. So in the early 30s, it totally shifted into a totally different perspective as far as time and money return and being financially in a position not have to work anymore, to where ultimately at mid 30s, I technically, was on paper anyway, retired. It was awesome.
Well, I mean, I asked that question because, I think I had somebody on here a couple of weeks ago, and she's 30. She's turning 30 this year. And I asked her, "What are you thinking about retirement?" She goes, "I don't know." Right? And I don't think people give enough thought to that. And then I also share, listen, I hate the word retirement. I mean, I think that word was designed, to me, it's a negative word. I'd rather people strive for what you did, which is what's called financial independence, right? Let's all strive to be fine, because, and I don't want to blame the government, so to speak, but it's been so programmed for so many years in this country. Retirement is an age, right? Like you mentioned a minute ago, go do 30 years for, at your JOB, wherever, get the golden watch, and then you get this retirement. Well, now they're telling you have to work, trade time for money till you're 65 years old, right? And the government gives you your Social Security when you're 65 years old. And so everybody has been, to my opinion, brainwashed to believe, right? It's a belief system that retirement is an age. I'm like, you guys, right there, you're losing. You're going to lose when you believe 100%. That retirement is an age, because you're just going to keep working thinking, well, it's not time yet. It's not time yet. I'm 35. I still got 30 years to go. I'm 40. I got 25 years to go. Like, that's silly. We shouldn't do that. If we strive to do the right things with our money and become financially independent, which you did at 35, right? You became financially independent. You didn't have to work. These things aligned for you and was giving you, money was working for you. You weren't working for money. I think we would all be so much better off if that was the mindset. Stop chasing retirement. Start chasing financial independence.
I remember a very specific weekend where I had a transformational paradigm shift with the context of retirement. And it was obviously something I'll never forget. And it was fortunately an in-person experience with one of the greats that we've all studied over the years, is Zig Ziglar. And I'll never forget, I was 34 and I was doing great running this agency, and someone asked Zig, because at that time in 2002, he was 76. I'm 76 years young, and he's jumping up and down on stage and really fit, because he talked about he doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, eats right, and gets up every morning. And so someone asked him, "Mr. Ziglar, with all due respect, we know you're very wealthy based on your successful career. We can see you're very healthy, but I'm confused," because they had that regular context of retirement. We would have thought you would have retired years ago. And I'll never forget what Zig said. He said, "I get that a lot, but I'll tell you what I told everybody else. I'm never going to retire because I'm refired. And I'm never going to give up. And heck, I'll never even shut up until the Lord takes me up, all right?" Because it's financial independence. That's a goal that you can set young, but retire, sit on a golf course every single day, maybe every once in a while, great, or go fishing every single day, play bingo. No, like, God willing, I'll be in my 70s or 80s, still mentoring, teaching, coaching, helping clients, teaching, grandkids until I'm 100. There's never going to be retire.
Well, that's
being financially independent.
Yeah, exactly the way you describe it is every entrepreneur that I know and I talk to is the same thing. Like, no, there's no retirement in the sense that what's taught early in life. Retirement is, that's it. You stop working, you don't have to work anymore, right?
Right.
And if I need to define retirement, I'll define retirement is you have a choice. You reached a point in your life where you don't have to work. But if you want to work because you love doing what you're doing, you're bringing value to the world, you're helping people, go ahead. Because I know people that claim to be retired, but because they're living on $1,000 a month from the government or something, right? And I says, bro, you're not retired, you're unemployed, and you're living on a government assistance. That does not put you in the classification of retirement. I'm sorry. Right. I just don't believe it is, right? You're unemployed, living on assistance from somewhere, somebody, right? Government, family, whatever it may be. So don't use that term. And again, boy, I just like to have people get rid of that term. Your goal is to be financially independent at the earliest possible age, and now you have a choice. What do you want to do now, right? But at least you don't have to wake up, go trade time for money for somebody, and you have to do it or you can't pay your bills. That's the point you want to get 100%. To, right? So basically, that was like you said, a paradigm shift, and I And I think everybody's got to have that at some point in time. And what age? And the earlier the better. Would you agree? I mean, imagine not just you, but people not having that paradigm shift until you're 45, 50, 55 years, 50 years old. 50 years old is kind of a wake up call. Like, holy shit, here I go. Oh my God, I'm nowhere near where I want to be. And then you got to start doing double time. But yeah, are you? Because I know you're in the financial space, so let's get into there and how you help people, right? Because Eric's definitely helps a lot of people. And when you come across your clients are at that point where they must have had this mindset shift, like, oh man, I'm either starting to make more money that I don't need to go waste. What am I going to do with it? Or I'm really thinking consciously now, like, I have to do things for my future. And guys like you who can help them put their monies in vehicles. In your case, you help people with earning tax-free dollars. Why don't you talk to the audience about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the key is like you said, Kevin, when you love what you do and you have fun and you enjoy it. I think one of the things I remember my dad teaching me about business is he said, son, if you always put people before profits, the profits will always follow when you are doing things the right way. And I never forgot that. And so now it's kind of been coming full circle where I've been fortunate to play on different teams with different sports, if you will. We'll call it, like you talk about regularly, which is the different asset classes. You got the real estate sport, you've got the stock market sport, you've got insurance world sport, you've got commodities with gold and silver and cryptocurrencies and all these different things. And what I've tried to do is realize most people, the advice they're getting is very subjective and it's very limited. When you can try and broaden that perspective, like we talk about in real estate, you and I've talked about many times, like the house. In a house in real estate, you want a couple little rooms, or if you could build it out within the budget and have several rooms, you're going to have more to do. And in money, we call it diversification, asset allocation. That'd be great, right? So there's a couple things I found along the way over the last 25, 30 years is there's some commonalities that are very critical when it comes to any of these financial strategies or asset classes. And the main theme of what I try and teach and help people with is understanding, regardless of which one of those strategies or asset classes you're putting your money into, there's two things that pretty much 99% of them have in common. And that's risk, like you talked about earlier. Your money's at risk. It can go up or it can go down, period. And the biggest expense that pretty much everybody's going to have their whole life is taxes. You're going to pay, predominantly through income taxes, a lot of your money. And so if we could greatly minimize and in some cases even eliminate those elements, well, fundamentally, you're just going to be better off and it's going to be a safer, more sound complement to the other areas where you do have more upsides and potential downsides. And so that's really the heart of what I try and do, is really focus and teach some of these tax-free strategies.
You know, I'm going to ask you this. I got two more questions. The first one I want to ask you is, you know, there's that term, right? 2020 hindsight, you know, Monday morning quarterback, right? Could have, would have, should have kind of thing. But what would you tell your 21-year-old self based on what you know today? What would you tell your 21-year-old self?
I would say, like you taught your daughter, when you use conservative approaches first, put the rainy day fund first, and then the higher, sexier, fun stuff at risk second. I didn't learn that till way, way later. You know, it took, quite frankly and transparently, multi-million-dollar losses that I incurred at 40 when I was doing real estate at a really high level. And had I 10 years earlier, 15 years earlier, learned about some of these more conservative, principal protected, tax-free, long-term, well, I would have been in a whole different ballgame, because I put all the money I did have into these other asset classes, but they were all at risk and they were all taxed. So that's what I would tell. That's why the younger, the better. Like both of my sons have these accounts set up, and anybody I talk to, whether any age, but the younger the better. Get them started, because like you talked about, the compounding interest, the good old rule of 72, which I know you've taught many times, can be very, very powerful when you get that money in motion like that. I call it the foundation in the house. Everyone's in the rooms doing all the stuff. I call it in the money house. Let's build that foundation out. Set it and forget it. It's not sexy. It's not crazy. But long term, it'll surprise you when you all of a sudden have gray hair like we do.
Right.
When you didn't think you were ever.
Exactly. No, great advice. To me, when we can reflect like that on anything, right? It's we go through life and we're doing everything and things don't always work out. And we have to learn from our losses. We have to learn from our failures, right? And sometimes you have to really reflect, sometimes way far back, to make the right move, right? Make the right decision. Before we go here, I want people, because I know you can help them. They're out there, they're listening. I want you to go ahead and plug what you do and how you can help them and how they can reach you.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that. Well, first, I want to acknowledge you, Kev, for having me on today, and also the thing that I think is at the heart of who I am and what I do and what I want to help is leaving a legacy. And I think you, like I am, have the privilege and blessing of mentoring and having your daughter work with you in the business as a young aspiring entrepreneur. And I've had that ability and privilege with my son, Easton, who's 20, working with me and teaching him in the company. So very simply, if you want to kind of take a look at a little of the tour of the house, so to speak, and how to get into some of the different things and ultimately have a conversation about some of these fundamental tax-free strategies, my company's Wealth Architecture Group. The website is wagtaxfree.com, wagtaxfree.com. And right in the About section, Easton had just rebuilt this last year. There's some videos on who we are and the different things we do, and then what we do. It talks about the different divisions. But simply, easiest thing to remember is you go on there in the top right, you can click on the icon that says book an appointment. I just love sharing and chatting and getting to know people. Click on that sucker, jump in my schedule. We'll get on a virtual high five face-to-face like this and be happy to help and download anything I can.
Well, that's an awesome offer for you to share with people. And again, for you guys that are out there that are not 100% just, struggling with money where you can't do anything, but you're coming into a time where you're like, man, I really need to start doing something good for my money, for me later kind of thing. Eric's definitely going to help you and open your eyes to things that you've probably never, because the things that you do, we don't hear about, right? And I don't want to say it's the hidden secret, but you got to be proactive to find somebody like yourself.
Well, funny you mentioned, I call it the secrets of the wealthy, because statistically, a single-digit percentage of the population really has all the knowledge and has been shown and taught these high-end principles. What I have tried to do is learn all of them, but now not just share them with other really wealthy people that are the small percentage. I'd rather focus on the 90 to 95% and say, hey, it's all scalable. It's all relative, whether you're contributing $10,000 a month into a particular bucket or $100 a month. Everybody gets to play.
Right. And everybody should play. Again, too many people are out there trading time for money and just making money and spending money, You got to put money to work, folks. You have to nothing makes more money than money. You got to put it to work. So, well, man, Eric, thanks for coming out. It's been awesome. Big takeaway here is, guys, reflect. If you're anywhere over 40, what do you ask? What are you telling your 21-year-old self? What did you not do that you probably should be doing, right? Or any of the lessons you learned here today. So again, Eric, thanks for coming out. I mean, that was awesome.
Thanks for having me, brother.
For you guys out there watching this on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that or smash that like button, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you're out there on the podcast venues, follow the podcast. They come out every week. You're going to hear a good story. So until then, remember, they come out every Wednesday, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hey, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Really enjoyed making all these episodes for you. Remember, we're just having conversations with people's journey with money and the things they did right with it, the things that did wrong with it, and how did they really come about
getting their mindset with money. So every episode's different. We all have a good takeaway from them. So do me a favor, hit the like button, smash the like button, and subscribe to my channel, because every episode that I do is going to be different, as all our journeys are different. So you guys take care, and we'll talk to you next week.